Hi, my name is M. Perzo, and I wanted to do my presentation on dying in the transgender community, respecting identity even in death. I am non-binary, which makes me a member of the transgender community, so I thought this was something important for me to explore a little bit more. I want to start by going over a few terms just to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Some of you might be familiar with these already, but I just figured we'd go over them really quickly. So, gender identity is a person's internal sense of their gender. Cisgender are people whose gender identity matches the gender they were assigned at birth. So, for example, a person who was assigned female when they were born and still identify as female or a woman would be a cisgender woman. Transgender is an umbrella term for people who have a gender identity that differs from the one that they were assigned at birth. It's most commonly used to refer to people who are still within the male female binary, but who do not identify with the gender they were assigned when they were born. So, this would be trans men and trans women. Non-binary is yet another umbrella term for people who do not strictly fit within the binary of male and female and who do not identify with the gender they were assigned when they were born. So this includes people who are gender fluid, genderqueer, agender, people who just consider themselves non-binary. Next is when someone transitions, part of their transition might include changing their birth name. And to dead name someone is when you refer to a trans or non binary person as the name that they were assigned when they were born that was used before they transitioned. Misgendering is similar, and that is referring to a trans or non binary person by the gender they were assigned at birth. And this includes incorrect pronoun use, calling someone boy, man, girl, woman, or any gender based slang. Next, I wanted to talk about a woman named Jennifer Gable. She passed away suddenly of a brain aneurysm in 2014. As is the case with many younger adults, Jennifer's next of kin was her parents, and they handled the funeral and the burial. Jennifer's friends were shocked and horrified to see during the open casket that her hair had been cut short. She was dressed in a suit, and all presentation and mention of Jennifer was that of a man instead of the woman that she was. Jennifer was transgender, and her family were not accepting of her identity and did not respect it when she died. Throughout her service, Jennifer is dead named, and throughout the obituary, she is dead named and misgendered as well. The photo that was used in the obituary was from before she had transitioned. She was buried with her dead name, despite having legally changed it in 2007. Jennifer is not the only one that this happens to. In April of this year, a teenage boy in Australia was given two separate funeral ceremonies after his father wanted to bury him under his dead name. There are some laws that are coming about that will help the situation, including a law in California that was made to ensure someone's gender on their death certificate matches their gender identity. So basically, the person filling out the death certificate has to ensure that their gender matches their gender expression, but this is confirmed either by using a government issued document or evidence of gender confirming medical procedures. This unfortunately leaves out a lot of people who have not legally or medically transitioned because either they don't need to or because they feel they can't afford to. The transgender community unfortunately faces a lot of death. 40% of transgender people have reported attempting suicide, which is almost 9 times the national average. 30% of transgender people have reported being homeless at some point in their lives, which leaves them exposed to random acts of violence and dying of exposure. Transgender women specifically are 4 times more likely to be murdered than their cisgender counterparts. The best way to ensure that identity is respected in death is through legal documentation. Unfortunately, death can happen unexpectedly at any time, so these documents are important to have even if you're young and you're healthy. It's important for anyone to have these documents, but is critical for queer people to ensure that their identity is respected if they're either too sick to explain themselves or when they die. The first piece of documentation I want to talk about is an advance directive. This allows you to plan ahead for your healthcare if you're not able to speak and can include things that are fairly universal, including do not resuscitate orders and instructions on whether or not you'd like to be on life support. For transgender people, it can also include things like wanting to continue hormone replacement therapy as long as it doesn't interfere with your life saving medications. A living will is similar. It's a statement of your wishes if you're unable to speak or you become impaired to the point where you can't make decisions on your own. And this can direct healthcare workers, funeral directors, and other people on how you would like to be treated, particularly as a person, and could include what your pronouns are, your name you'd like to be referred to, and visitors. Particularly for transgender people, it can also be important to include a people that should have no authority clause. And this basically prevents estranged family members that do not acknowledge your true gender identity from making decisions on your behalf. Next, also similar to an advance directive or a living will, is a power of attorney. This designates a specific person or a group of people to make decisions on your behalf. Otherwise, those decisions are allowed to be made by your next of kin, even if they are, again, estranged and they do not agree with your transition. One type is the medical power of attorney, which is also a healthcare proxy or a medical proxy. This gives a specific person the ability to make healthcare decisions on your behalf if you're not able to. Typically, the thing to do is to appoint one person as it's easier to make those healthcare decisions quickly, but you can appoint alternates in case that person is unreachable. Another type of power of attorney is a financial power of attorney, and it's similar to a medical proxy, but gives the person the ability to make financial decisions on your behalf and could actually be the same person as your medical proxy. Next is a hospital visitation directive. Typically, if you're not able to speak in the hospital, your people who are able to visit you are next of kin and relatives. So, a married spouse or people who are blood relatives to you. A hospital visitation directive tells the hospital who you want visiting you, even if they are not legally related to you. So, for a lot of queer people, particularly people in the transgender community, found family can be extremely important. So, this directive would allow friends, unmarried partners, and other members of your found family to visit you in the hospital if you're not able to tell the hospital verbally that that's what you would like. The next couple of things I'm going to talk about are pertain directly to after you die, as opposed to if you're in the hospital or incapacitated. A funeral agent is a person who is in charge of making sure your body and funeral wishes are taken care of after you die, and a funeral directive is a written plan of your funeral wishes. In some situations, living wills, advance directives, and medical proxies will expire when the person dies. So, having either a funeral agent or a funeral directive, while it is similar to things like an advance directive or a medical proxy, make sure that those wishes are continued throughout the funeral process after you die. Lastly, is the thing that people are probably the most familiar with, which is a regular will. And that is just what you want to be done with your possessions after you die, as well as your other assets. So, again, if you're estranged from your family, you might not want your assets to go to them. You might want them to go to members of your found family. And having that written down will ensure that those things happen. A lot of what I've talked about might feel like a lot of steps and it might feel unfair, which I agree is not necessarily fair to have to jump through all of these hoops to make sure that you are respected if you are sick or after you die. But unfortunately, society has not caught up to the point where we can expect all people to be respected in death. So, the best way for anyone, but particularly queer and transgender people, to be respected while in the hospital and incapacitated or after they die is by having legal documentation in place that explains your wishes and leaves you in the care of your true family, even if they're not blood related. Thank you.